Enti kokobono na yede amaw no pomodia se ubebo ho ban afrisa yare nyina ho na ankonkofa ehaw bia amfa mbrel ye sha se le di kan eka show happy AU day, happy AU day, happy African Union day. Edin kai show ye tiefo ne yahwefo nyina sa ne senti no e wo se ye bomodia se ye bedi nkoma eka AU ho asem eka African development and African unity ho asem eno ho enkomo ena no pay ye pese yedi na ye nyina ye de boa ye ho so ye beka brofo kakra nti no e wo se wo say ye kofa ye de London about K-Star TV or say it was yes sakasa no na ye ka brofo kakra na ye nuanom abrofo fo no omo so omo nti de ye ka no hey and then no yeah ni sa about sandwich tree fancy English nzema everything it's sana it's so joining me here today at the studios I have Mr. KWAMENA MICAH here with me, and he's going to take us through the topic of brain drain versus brain gain, and this is all in relation to the African Union Day. Mr. MICAH, good morning. And welcome to our studios. Yeah, we are so happy to have you here this morning. Yeah, and I want to know this morning if anybody is watching Coastal TV at all, what should they expect from you?
Well, it's going to be not theoretical, but kind of probing.
Yeah,
we are going to probe some of the exchanges that the story about the Atlantic. We got there, then later on we realized that some people died of ballistic that ran out. The most important thing is that what is it there to bring? The breeze, or being the goodness within tourism, with economics, anthropologically, we have to have a chat about that, because we need to understand whether we are really going to enjoy or savor the benefits of it, or we are still going to be in the doldrums. Because mind you, a lot more people, and I dare say that, I think slavery is over, but it's still intact in one way, in a pseudo kind of chemistry way. So I think that's the conversation we're going to have.
I'm looking forward to that. I'm really anticipating a lot of things from this conversation. So I'm just going to hand over my seat to Mr. MICAH, and then he will take us through the next conversation. But before that, we have to go on a short break. And then we'll be right back. Just don't go away. Stay here, right here with us.
National Petroleum Authority say, Mawo bambo hu hia ukane. Ain't no, stay back and stay safe. National Petroleum Authority ebo bibia kokose se fuel tank enya kwenhia na edane a menko ho nkwaye wadwen se okosisa petrol anafango no na afenso menye wadwen se wo ben fuel tank enya kwenhia ne ho akwa kodwetwa videos ana pictures na petrol anafango wo hwenso uhua ko wumu a enye sunsun asobone ewo apomodensem so fango nso eho ahometinti no enfomso akitu ebi ebetumi ameja tom amana gise ewom eba ne saa nipa dodo timi femu hihye ehwe mo nkwa emeja pade dodo na nso esei eno nti memfa wo nkwa nto chacha enye saa obenu ho nkwa na nyina se wo hu se fuel tank bi enya kwanhia na adane amafango no ebugu mpa hwa na wa aman ho da. Stay back and stay safe. Emomo no aya fredum jejumayefo ana posifo no momehwe nso ano utumi nso efre National Petroleum Authority ewo 0302 550 380 kaise wonkwa wo hoi eho hia bebre esensa afango no kokoboi National Petroleum Authority enede bro.
sell gift shop, a place you can rely on. You call on us and we'll deliver. Thank you.
Africa's talent is global, but what happens when it comes back home? This week on Morning Mix, we are adding and asking questions about the brain drain, diaspora investment, and Ghana's future. Our guest is an African-American entrepreneur building between the US and Cape Coast. We'll talk money, skills, and what it really takes to turn roots into results. Morning Mix, Africa, Ghana, and the diaspora, unfiltered.
Well, it's important we start with a little poem. It has always been a city of another world, approachable by the people only as near as the other temples, where their devotion led them. We are here this morning to have a narrative. In fact, it's going to be a very fair conversation. And guess who my guest is? In a short while, I'll introduce him. But you know, from the African perspective, we see it as a whole journey out of Africa and in Africa. So it's not complex. It's about the diasporan wages and that of the African institution. We are going to have a wonderful interactive discussion here. And with me this morning is Professor Mario. You're welcome.
Thank you. This is really Dr. Mario. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's good to know. Yes, so the narrative is going to be a very flexible thing. I want to start off from the point where once upon a time, anthropologically, we all know there was a journey out of Africa, and then the Atlantic was the main point. But then people got submerged into so many things, taking away all the argosies of life, you know, so they feel so entraced and taken out of bondage. But then we're back. But we want to have a clinical way. How do you see it? This journey, was it of repose, of we getting benefit economically in terms of tourism? I mean, we want to know whether we are moving on, and the money that we make, the talent amass that we get, how do we bring it back and make a pool out of it?
In terms of improving and strengthening the African continent?
Exactly.
Yes. There's many ways to look at it, actually. So Africans were taken out of the continent to spread different parts of the world, especially the Western Hemisphere. We know
exactly.
The transatlantic slave trade played a significant role in the most modern recent times. So in terms of the diaspora, and sometimes it's good to have, I guess, context in terms of the population of the continent of Africa is now over 1 billion people, and they estimated about between 150 to over 200 million people of African descent outside of the continent. And so often the idea is that those who are outside of the continent, is something I'm exploring in my work actually too, is somehow they have certain technologies and skills to bring back to the continent to help improve the continent. I think that's also a narrative also could be questioned, but also too, we are in a period of time too where the world is very much globalized and many different things are happening in the world, but we see the African continent today in many ways a provider of raw resources to the globe. So oftentimes resources are taken out, cocoa, gold, and they are refined in the Western Hemisphere, other parts of the world, and then they are brought back to the continent in terms of sometimes 5 times, 10 times the price.
Intriguing. And that takes me to the next thing. This conversation is also looking at, we are not so much impoverished within the confines of the African continent, because they also take us through schooling and then all that, the tag of education. People come out as doctors and all that. But there's a twist. The twist that I do have, which is very obvious to and clinical to everybody, is that some of them, they leave the country and then they go outside because something is going on. I don't know what is going on. What is your thought about that?
Okay, so I'm going to give some context. Myself, I'm from the African diaspora, and I was born on a tiny island called St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean. And so many of us also to migrate to especially the United States and Europe, oftentimes seeking greener pastures because of the economy, and so many people migrate out for greener pastures, but but the question is, especially on the continent of Africa, if you want to become a superpower in the world, oftentimes you have to come to the continent because of the resources that is here. So the question is to why are we not able, or how can we further, rather than selling the natural resources at such with no value added, at such a low price, can we refine those resources on the continent? Can we have the skills and the resources to do that? Because going outside, the idea that grass is green on the other side. In my classes at the university and interacting with many Ghanaian youths, they feel like there's so much opportunity in the West and so forth, but I have lived there and I'm now living on the continent. I've been here for about 8 years now. Married to a Ghanaian woman, we have Ghanaian children.
Good to know.
And so
I wanted to see you and ask what's your favorite food, but we didn't get back there.
Yes. Yeah. And so, but in the West, it's the opportunities there, some opportunities there, yes, the jobs are more plentiful in many ways, but also too, there's racism there. Africans anywhere outside of the continent are treated as sometimes subhuman or less than human and not full human.
That's right.
And that's something that you experience in the West, in Europe. You go to Africans, go to any other parts of the world. Sometimes they are treated ways that are not how others are treated, basically. And so there's some opportunities out there, but there are also some challenges out there. But if you speak to most Ghanaians or anyone that have immigrated outside of their home country, and we must also keep this in mind, it's 3% of the global population live in a country that they were not born in. 3% is a very small number. And the 3% that is out there, their goal is to make enough money so that they can come back home. And oftentimes, they don't. Oftentimes it takes them years, decades to make it. They have children, they have family, And by the time they reach retirement age, that's when they finally have a chance to come back home. But sometimes medical issues and other issues also keep them there. And so most of their dreams to come back, but it's very difficult. I tell my students in terms of living in America, they are not aware of this, but most Americans live on credit. Most Americans live on credit. The car that they drive, they got it for 5 years. They have to make a payment on the car, and after 5 years they would own the car, but they would have to make payment of the car every month. They cannot buy the car outright because their income is actually not
the mortgage system.
The mortgage system. It take you 30 years. Mortgage. You get a mortgage for a home. The first 15 years you're paying the interest. And if year 16 you finish paying the interest and now you're going to the house, the next 16 years or whatever, if you lose your job or not working, they take the house from you, all of the money that you have given to them, and they sell the house at a lower price so they could get back their profit. And so when the mortgage crisis happened in the United States in 2009, millions of Americans lost their home and lost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so it's often a rat race there. They don't show you it much, but the work system there is also very different, where the employer makes sure they get as much out of you as possible. They pay you, but they make sure they get as much out of you as possible. And I give my students an example. This job that I used to work at called Nexus, they had an agreement with the employees that you could take any sick day that you want. You could take off sick days as much as you want, but there was one caution, was that the job that I was working, we had to produce, we had to read books and produce index and summary of the reading. And the first month I started working there, and some of the books are maybe a few pages, some of them from the United Nations, different organizations. Some of them could be maybe 10 pages, some of them could be 300, 400, 500 pages. At the end of the month, they expect me to produce 40 of those summaries and index. The next month, it has to be 45. So they don't care so much of if I miss this day or that day of work. But at the end of the month,
they make sure they exact whatever they want.
Yes.
So the narrative is getting intriguing and interesting. In educational system, all the models that we have here in Ghana and maybe to a larger extent Africa, the aim of education is to make you fit to live, okay, and to be lived with.
Yes.
So your individual acquisition of skill, and then the pattern that you reel out in your community, in the wider society, that's fit to live with. Now, how do you compare that of Ghana or that of Africa and that of, because you have made very intriguing allusions, telling us about you work, but they were exact more thing from you and all that. So if we had that opportunity here, if you are putting them on a balance, of course there cannot going to be any mind balance, but at least that kind of balance, I hope you see, we want the narrative to be as clear, because there are a lot of people listening to us. How come we school, and I can give you a good example. One Professor Aloti, schooled in Ghana National, got to the university, had the opportunity, and then went outside. The end of the story is that he was working with NASA. Yes, he was present anytime any spacecraft had to leave. He was a serious mathematician from Ghana, and there are thousands and thousands, for that I can yield, and I know you acknowledge that, of the African capable of fit to live and to be lived with. But how come, if you are outside, the opportunities are there, they will exact more energy out of you, but then why is it that when they exact energy over here, we don't get the results, and yet we have all the resources? We have gold, we have lithium, we have... Are you getting where I'm
going? Yeah, I'm getting what you're saying, yes. I don't know if I have the answer, but I have some, maybe perhaps theories I even... so my experience here, it's... I would say my experience around Cape Coast, guys, is very hard to generalize.
Yeah.
Sometimes I see here where oftentimes the employer sometimes also try to see how much they can get from their worker. And then on the reverse side, sometimes you see the employees trying to see how much they can get from the boss in terms of working. But also too, we have a situation here, I think, on the continent where we provide, for the most part, raw resources. In terms of refining those resources and selling them, it creates a smaller market perhaps here where, I mentioned this to my students that 77% of the population on the continent are below the age of 35. So it's a massive labor force in terms of the youths, and that is going to increase over the decades. And so there is not a lot of employment opportunities. So I think what happens sometimes is that, if you have skills, you perhaps want to move to Accra, where maybe those skills could be developed somewhere, move out of the country so you could develop those skills. But I'm not sure if we have all of the institutions that we need here to actually maintain those systems. Like, for example, I had a colleague of mine who mentioned, I can't remember the person's name, but he mentioned a person had run a private school in the United States. And they did so well at the private school. But when they came here and they were running a private school, somehow it wasn't working. So I don't know if it's perhaps also to the infrastructure.
And policy?
And policy, yes. Might have an impact. And so that might be part of the problem. But
because the scenario, I really understand where you're coming from, because at least you are not as stint when it comes to about 8 years and then in and out. At least your observation is clinical. But then let us look at the scenario. I live in Cape Coast. Probably my skill does not detach me to work only, but maybe I can work in Kumasi, or I can go to Accra or Takoradi. Now let's look at the infrastructure, the road. You don't expect somebody to come and build our roads for us, because people go to schools and universities and they have a lot of civil engineers, we have mechanical engineers, we have sewage engineers. If there's a need for desalination of water from the sea, they are equipped to do that. But then there comes another twist. That is where I'm coming. Funds allocation and suspicion of bribery and, talk about, irregular financial, because we are look at it from the point of economics, the tourism, all that is encased in it. But then I want to work there. A train system would have taken, you know what I'm talking about. At least in the UK, you can just take a train from Oxford and then go to maybe Shepherd Bush or Amisby Pali, or you can go, let's use Ghana, Takoradi. I stay in Takoradi, but I work in Kaswa. The train is going to take me there, and there's no need for me to shift my family to that place. Now here the concentration is that then I have to move, and then there's only one person who's going to move, everybody's going to be moving. Then it gives another burden, bulb concentration in Accra. And then what happens? The infrastructure is not enough to accommodate us, and that also brings a whole lot of things. That's why I say we are having a deep narration, because yes. I see, what's your take on that? The role that the government must play, so that if we are to bring our diasporans, they are our own, do you understand me? Our own brothers and sisters that are out there and coming back. The skill that they do have, how can it impart on it? Not only them, whilst we have a kind of receiving end in the country, because we are not just expecting some kind of Santa Claus box or something for somebody to bring, but then how accommodative is ours, so that when they come, they fit in. That's where my next question goes.
Yes, I think that, you mentioned policy. I think the issue of policy actually plays a role where if the diaspora is being welcomed back, is there a mechanism to also leverage what they could provide or what they could do? And if there isn't a system or mechanism, then, frustration comes in, and then it's not possible. I've heard, where, different projects might be started by one government and then another government gets into power and the project is left behind. Like, those kind of ways is a problem, in terms of...
Deep problem.
Yes, in terms of developing the nation. And I think that in many ways, the structure and the system has to be transformed, I would argue, for things to actually operate and work more effectively. Because if the system and structure isn't there, then, how Africa is positioned also in the global system. It's where the mechanism to go beyond, say, for example, we produce cocoa, and 60 to about 90% of the cocoa come between Ivory Coast and Ghana. And if we were, and the cocoa industry is, if chocolate industry is a $100 billion industry, but in terms of the two nations, they only represent 4 to 8% in terms of profit in that industry. And if they wanted to expand and say that cocoa industry collapsed in the West, there's almost no mechanism here to fill that gap, because one, there's value added, where you also have to produce the cocoa. But when you produce the cocoa, you also have to create markets and you have to also be able to trade. And so there's also the issue of the trade networks, where Ghana is a part of the WTO, but also to other nations are a part of it. So will they also allow Ghana to trade internationally their cocoa if they have cocoas in those other countries competing with them, and so forth? So it becomes an issue of coming up maybe with a long-term plan in terms of development and trying to enact that plan. And I think the present government is trying to add value to the goal that is being explored.
Yes, exactly what I wanted to ask. I think the trade stock is more about adding value, because if we have a whole shipment of the cocoa beans, the ports, and they go outside the country for the market add value, and then they add value to have an impression, because it comes back to us in the form of chocolate and other devices. I mean, we have cocoa oil. So research has shown that we have, even shea butter is now a very provocative and powerful commodity, and we have that in abundance in Ghana. And we are not adding it. So the question that everybody asks, and I can promise you that's what he asked. Probably you have met a lot of people asking you that question in the world around. What is delineating us from that stock? Because we have to add value to anything at all they do. If, for example, gold, we extrapolate it from the ore, and then that is it, we send it back, and they sell to the world market. It is not like somebody who is able to ramify it into different things that is useful and is marketable. I'll give you another instance. Somebody is a farmer. People at the back of the mind is, a farmer. What am I going to get from a farmer? I'm a school gentleman. I'm good looking. Why should I go and farm? As if you only farm with hose and cutlasses. You get what I'm saying? But then we have excavators, we have bulldozers, we have planters, and then if you have just about, 4 tractors, it's auxiliary. So the back, you can just support it with your planters, with your plowers, and then all that. And at the end of the day, there is somebody who graduated at Tech, and maybe he's a graphic designer, and then, he can come by and come out with the packaging system, and then the reinforcement of the quality of the product that is coming out, the sustainability, the market. I like it when you mention that, because that's the main thing. It's so clinical. But we leave that one, we just do the first part, and then you take a bath, and then you want somebody to come and wipe you up. So that is it. What is your take on that, if I may ask?
Yes, I think they also,
in tandem with the schooling and the skill orientation. Yes, market, skill, market, yeah.
Yes, so I think, in terms of stepping back to, there's also to the issue of confidence. I remember when I was, one time I had some new shoes, and I remember a student compliment me on the new shoes that I had. And I said, I got it from Accra. And they said, oh, I hope it lasts.
Can you imagine that?
So, I was taken back, but they also reminded me of similar in the Caribbean and, like where
exactly.
also do we have confidence also in ourselves?
That's a strong point, yeah.
Yes. So, for example, if we see one of our own selling something and someone else selling something, say a European or Asian selling something, do we assume that one of our own cannot produce something so good? Who will we buy from? We talk about, for example, today we talk about Italian leather, but in the 1400s, the best leather in Europe considered the best leather in Europe, it was referred to as Moroccan leather.
Yeah.
But the Moroccan leather actually came from Nigeria, northern Nigeria.
Yeah.
And it was considered to be the best leather in all of Europe. And so, so this wasn't always there on the continent. And so the issue of also to building confidence among ourselves that we could do things. Because when we actually, say we buy rice from the Asians, we actually put our brothers and sisters out of a job because they could have been maybe producing the rice.
Exactly.
But also the question is the rice same quality as the rice from farmers? But when we buy things from the outside, we actually employing people to work on the outside. And the people on the inside who could be producing and working on it, they're out of a job. They don't have a job. So some of it too, I think, is also the confidence that we need to have in ourselves. And actually, yes, build those institutions, having the government where the government is able to support all of these different initiatives in terms of expanding, because if we're able to add value, we are creating jobs. Rather than our youths going out to look for jobs, we are creating jobs here. And as we add value, we're able to also produce more and also create more jobs and expand, the industries that we're in. And I think that's the direction we need to go in. I think what has happened in the past sometimes when our leaders, some of it is also leadership too, when some of our leaders are maybe in cooperation many times with the Western interests or other interests that wants Africa to be producers of our resources. And maybe the issues of corruption where they get something from it, but it comes at the expense of the masses of people not having job opportunities. So I think there is a change that is happening in the continent. We also must remember in terms of the West is declining.
Yeah.
People are not looking at it closely, but if you look at it closely, the West is declining. In the next 5 years, as I tell my students, China will be considered to be the largest economy in the world. About 10 years ago, the G7, the nations that represent mainly the United States and the West, had the greatest wealth in the world in terms of global wealth. About 10 years ago, that has shifted where the BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa, they will have surpassed with BRICS now, and it's continue to increase. So we see in the United States where people like Donald Trump are, he's making sure immigration, sending people back. He has arresting people on the street, even killing American citizens to send people back. So they are trying to maintain control of the decline, but also hold the resources. In Europe is the same thing. But also do we have something that happened in Europe that people are not taking so much notice of, is that in certain parts of this happened in America, is not happening, but in America, it's very difficult for you to have 3 or 4 kids because of how the system is structured. Like I gave the example, if I'm a lecturer working in the United States, and I have 3 kids that are in very young and have to go to daycare, it's almost impossible to pay all of those bills because it's like $1,000 a month to send your child to daycare. If you have 3 of them in daycare and your mortgage is almost $3,000,
exactly,
you're not making $6,000. You're barely making $6,000. You have to feed yourself. You have to do all of these other things. So the resources are limited, and so we have the situation where some people in the West, they're having even less children. Some of them are only having 1 child. Some of them are not even having children.
No.
And so if you have a couple, and you have a couple, you need to have two children to replace both of you, a father and a mother. If you only have one, it means basically the next generation will be half of what the generation is, and that has started to happen in parts of Europe. In Africa, the population is actually growing. In the next 25 years, as I mentioned before, like 1 in 4 human beings will be an African. And it's a very youthful population at that too. So we need to find ways actually and invest more in our youths and making sure we provide those opportunities, especially through the government. But a challenge we face too is that, and this being African Liberation Day, this being African Union Day, is what has happened before is when our leaders sometimes try to do this. Sometimes what we see happen to Kwame Nkrumah, what we see happen to Patrice Lumumba, who was basically chopped to pieces because he believed that the people of his country should control the resources. He was chopped into pieces, poured into acid, and killed with impunity, and he was a leader of independent Africa.
The body immersed in acid and all that.
Yes, and so we're seeing a period of time, even when we look at the Sahel state, neighboring state, where they're saying, if you look, for example, at Niger, as I mentioned before, Niger had produced enough uranium, and it's sold to France at such a low level that they're able to provide electricity in France. If that same uranium was used in Niger, every single person in that country would be able to have electricity.
And the new person is now changing things. He's trying to.
Yes.
So look to see if we're going back. That brings the story to this finality. I am looking at, especially taking the ideas, what you just expressed. It is there. But what is right now, the question is, what is it that is stopping the leaders from being bold and belligerent? If you listen to Kwame Nkrumah's voice and the things that he did, this country called Ghana, the secondary schools he built within a short time, he didn't even own any house, a personal house. He didn't, he was not impoverished, because a man that has ideas is never poor, like we always say. But then how do we change that into reality? Why is it that, another clue, others, some Europeans, they come to Ghana, they realize that, anything from outside is much better. Now they exploit that scenario. What do they do? The other day I saw in social media, I think you've seen it, simple foams, like mattresses that people sleep on. They have encased some kind of rubble, look like rock or something stiff, and then they just use some superficial thing to cover it, and then they are selling it. Because they know, when you go to, shop A, I'm just tagging it, shop A, their things are good. So now they are pumping it to you.
Yes.
Without you, because they have taken advantage of us. And I'm not going to sit and ask this question as if we are poor. We're not poor, we are rich.
No. Yes.
The mind is rich. So it's a kind of revolution that should go on. A kind of revolution that is where we put the interface. The brain drain and the brain that is now extrapolated. The one that go out to get it. When I go and get it, then I come back home and I build it. Not to come back and then exploit it. But then what is it for us? How is the receiving arm? How do we accommodate the people? How do we accommodate our brothers who for some time ago were lost, but they're back? And then they have to come together so that we unite to effectively build a resolute nation.
Yes, so I actually think it's, being an educator and being at the university, the center where I'm at, in the Center for African and International Studies, and we actually want to embark on such a change in terms of engaging the youths really and making them aware of the possibilities. The idea that, I remember one time someone said on I think it was a radio show, said the dream of the Ghanaian youth is to leave Ghana. So I came to my class and I told my class, I've heard this. Like, more than half of them said, yes, it's true. A few of them said, no, it's not true, it's not true. But a lot of them said it was true. And so I think many of the youths feel like the older generation have control of everything and they won't give us access to things. But I also tell them, when you look at Kwame Nkrumah and you look at leaders all over the world, when they started, they were very young. They were in their 20s. You know, when Nkrumah started, he started organizing at the university. You know, like when he was young, when he went to these different places.
Marcus, taking the words of Marcus Garvey and Du Bois. That's why he brought W.E. Du Bois even into the country.
Yes.
So they were very, very provocatively rich and culturally oriented. They knew that we must stand and not fall. Because they that, let me quote this Bible verse, they that trust the Lord shall be like Mount Zion, which cannot be removed but abideth forever. But then, how is, because my observation is clear, I don't know what happens outside. I know just a little. But then, the kind of motivation that goes on right after a child upbringing, parenting that is within the soul of the society, the mother, the father, and then that of the institutions, the school, because it's home first, parent first, before school.
Absolutely.
Everybody has become despondent. That's why when you ask the question, we all want to leave, because they lack that kind of, generosity, where their thought process is kind of sparkled with goodness, like, oh, it's possible, we are going to do it. It's not by any politician to tell you that. I don't believe in that one. It's the individual who should know that I'm capable of doing this because somebody did it, and I'm also capable of doing it.
Yes.
Because I think Burkina Faso, their rail line, I don't know whether you've seen the documentary, beautiful rail line. They have started it. Ghana, we used to have rail lines. It is gone. It needs to be resurrected, revived. There needs to be restoration, and today that we are sitting on the banner of what? African liberation. We need to liberate all kind of low down thought process. We should up our thought process. And how do we merge that? That's my next question. How do we merge that? The kind of people who come, because I'm not throwing any dust into the air, because somebody will come in and will be preaching you. At the end, you will be collecting all your money. I mean, I got to say it as it is, But if, like the churches, they had a lot more schools that are in the support mechanism, not extrapolating once again from them, because they got more money than we as individuals, the churches. So they need to just get that kind of loin burning up. How do you put this in perspective to the liberation of OE?
Yes, I mean, I think in many ways it's one way of looking at this is actually try to create, because what you see happen in other parts of the world, usually when revolution happens, it's trying to reach the masses and, especially the youths, because the youths are oftentimes, when you look at especially the 60s, 70s, 80s, if you look at Iran, you look at Cuba, you look at the United States, any country, when you see major changes happen, it actually often comes from the youths. And then but what ended up happening, even the Arab Spring in what is referred to as Arab Spring in Egypt, like it was the youths going out and different places. And what ended up happening too, though, is that usually it's the most organized groups that take over, usually when these protests and these call for change. And sometimes it goes back to the system that it was, because the system wasn't changed. It was more or less a demand for change, but it wasn't fully implemented. So I think many ways it's really maybe having mass education, starting with the youths, because it's something that I think won't happen overnight. I think it's something that we have to start doing in the different institutions. Like, for example, I use this example in terms of when we look at the Confucius Institution, Institute from China.
Yeah.
They are located in here in Ghana, and when I was on first move on campus, one of my neighbor, she was one of the director of the institute, and she invited me to a program that they had on campus. And when I went to the program on campus, I saw university students, they had high school students, they had even primary school students there, highlighting, speaking in Chinese, highlighting Chinese culture.
Beautiful.
And yes, and And I was thinking to myself, when we speak of African liberation, we're speaking about African unity. Can we have an institution that felt like that, even from the African Union, where in every country we're able to learn about each other? Because if we want to really unite,
exactly,
there must be somewhere we must learn about each other. And in those institutions where it could develop, for us to really think about how to develop the continent, where we actually have institutions across the continent in coordination, actually working on these things. So for me, the center that we have at UCC, we really want to develop the center much more so that they could actually start doing those things, start reaching out to the schools, and start actually from the primary school going up to the high school, so we could really transform the nation. We really want to see where the continent is decolonized and using indigenous knowledge. We want, for African problems, we want African solutions. So we want to really, really find a way where we could, many ways it seems like starting small, but after a period of time when it starts to grow, it'll start to expand and hopefully will transform the continent. So that's, but I think we could take it from many different angles.
Definitely.
This is in terms of education, but we should also create maybe social clubs where youths could also organize themselves and learn about, the significance of Africa. Because I think a lot of it also has to do with self-esteem and feeling that, we cannot produce anything. And I think until we are able to overcome that, if you even look at what is happening in South Africa, today I think some Ghanaians are returning.
Yeah.
They're going for greener pastures in South Africa, which is also an African country. And
at the end of the day.
at the end of the day. But we see the situation where Ghana and other African countries went to South Africa and they helped liberate South Africa from like colonial rules. And now, and sometimes, we blame South Africans for doing that, but also we must also look at apartheid, which lasted for almost 50 years. The damage that was done to South Africans, that they are not fighting Europeans.
But they are rather fighting those who collaborated to support them.
Yes.
Out of the dungeons of darkness.
Yes, so we have to educate ourselves that, because if we don't educate ourselves of what is happening and how we are harming ourselves, because that must be in some ways internal hatred of yourself because of what you have experienced. Because the person who look like you feel is taking your job, but the person who actually control the market, you don't do anything to them. So so I think a lot of it is also working internally on ourselves and also working in terms. I think we have to do both. It's external issues, but internal issues. But if we focus on only one, we still have problems. If we focus on external and we don't focus on the internal, we're going to run into problems. Because like now, many ways, new colonialism that we experience come from the Western powers. What we are seeing now, if the Western powers is removed, if we don't restructure our society, someone else will just fill the spot. Because we are producing raw resources. If the Europeans are not able and they're getting weaker, if they're not able to purchase it and buy it, refine it, do we have, are we going to turn to ourselves and say, Nigeria is selling oil, this other country is selling oil or whatever, we are going to buy from this country so that we could pool our wealth and our resources? Or are we going to say, Europeans know how to make these things better, so we'll buy from them? What makes it so that Europeans know how to produce this thing and we cannot? And so we have to ask ourselves also these questions, and I think we need to really also work on ourselves on this issue.
I appreciate that so much, because it's in line with it, because the tenor of this conversation is right. We can't exhaust all. It's overly tremendous, but we cannot exhaust all. But then it is so clear that we should take serious strides in our bid to redeem ourselves from the shackles of imperialism and colonialism. Because earlier on I did mention the harm that is ready to receive must be prepared. Other than that, whatever touches you will come crashing down. So, for example, what is it? It's obvious that we have to look at our schools, like you did mention, but even look at the media. It's something that we have to also look at. What do you think? The media, because let me give you this verse. we are all in social media, but there are a lot of negatives in it. Why is it that we don't take the positive aspect? For example, people just crossing a boat, crossing a river, it ends up with some collapsible damage. People get drowned because they were not wearing life-saving jackets. Life-saving jackets. I know you know, I can tell you know what I'm about to ask. That it's not something that is difficult, you have to import. Propane and then this kind of plastic and then foam. You can do it and manufacture it in the country. But we hear it and then we'll just go around, take some melodic pictures, and then it comes to the television, oh, the minister was here, the this thing was here, and then that's the end. That is why we have polytechnics, we have technical institutions. They are fit to live and to be lived with. They can manufacture blenders. They are capable of manufacturing blenders, of manufacturing corn mills, coming out with tractors for the farm. There are a lot of things that we can't be always overly dependent on. So the technology, that's why I'm going back to what I said earlier. I don't want you to retouch it, but then let's look at social media in tandem with education. You see, for example, word, sound, and power. What touches ourselves first must be last served. Some time ago it was black sheep. Have you heard it? Yes, that's the full, the colonial mentality. You understand me? They are using that as a tool to impair your thought process. But then now we should change the narrative. What is in our school books? What is the narrative? You know the story about this gay thing that infused itself, but I won't go there. But then the most important thing is what touches ourselves first shall be last served. What is it in the book that we read? How does it improve our thought process? How does it make us magnify our future and then make us capable of achieving it?
Yes, it's something that we have to look at, I think, as, yes, in the books that we have, social media, all of this, I think, are means of actually, it's ways that we can actually engage our youths, because what is coming on the social media, are we able to create content? That's also another thing too. At the university, we actually want to create a center that look at African studies and AI, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, because our youths know how to use, even I have a daughter that is like 2 years old. She's on the phone all the time. She's fighting me for the phone. So social media, yes, social media is so they are there. So I think that what we can do is actually, if we can also produce content, so we could also influence.
Just beautiful.
What is coming out there, because AI is considered to be.
They can't let go of it. No. So now when they pick it, what the content gives them is going to change them. Yeah. I always want the plate, but what is on the plate is that which will either make me or unmake me. So therefore, you are right. What should be the content in the social media? What is it that we vaporize and talk about? We don't have any movie about Kwame Nkrumah. I don't think so. We don't have a movie that have a narrative of somebody who was taking care of a little farm and barged into something, not a galamsey type, but barged into some kind of ore and was able to eventually, I'm cutting it short, eventually come out with a university, a playground in this community or in the society where he comes from. I mean, this thing is going to inspire the children, you see.
And then create jobs too.
Create jobs too.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So I mean, we really have to really work on these things, because we are creating jobs and also we are making sure that our children are enlightened, and we should use it to our advantage. Like, for example, in my classes, some of us think that, students shouldn't use AI tools to do, to help them with their assignment. And they say they shouldn't use AI at all. But I'm of the view that actually they should use AI, but we should teach them how to use AI. Because when they graduate and they have to work, somebody will be using AI, but you have to know how to use it rather than putting things in AI. Because if you put some things in AI, when it especially come to Africa, that's how I know sometimes when my students have used AI. You put some information in about Africa, AI has a lot of misinformation about the continent and the internet. so we would follow that information and reproduce it. And so we also have to tell our youths actually about this, that the world out there is, we're inundated with information that say that we are less. When we look at the media, look at the news, look at movies, even though we don't see it consciously, like subconsciously, it's sending messages to us. And so I think we need to also be more proactive in engaging those things, and have our youths that are unemployed start to work on these things, starting to create jobs, because all of these opportunities, there is a way to create jobs and monetize the process so that they're able to be employed but also able to reach other youths and making the continent a better place.